Kim Junho was 23 years old when he watched his world die. He stood on the bridge of the horizon, a small patrol ship that floated in the darkness near Saturn. His hands gripped the console so hard that his knuckles turned white. On the screen before him, Earth was burning. Great pillars of fire rose from the surface. The oceans boiled. Cities that had stood for thousands of years turned to ash in seconds. "No," he whispered. "No, no, no." The attack had come without warning. One moment, the sky above Earth was clear and blue. The next moment, it was filled with ships. Thousands of them. They were massive things, each one larger than any city on Earth. They came from the stars, and they came with one purpose: to kill everything. Admiral Beak Sunwoo had tried to fight. Earth's small fleet of 50 ships rose to meet the invaders. It was like throwing stones at a hurricane. The alien weapons cut through human ships like they were made of paper. Admiral Beak's flagship, the Soul, lasted exactly 4 minutes before it exploded in a ball of white fire. From the Soul orbital station, Park Yuna watched the battle end before it truly began. She was the chief engineer of the station, a woman of 40 years who had spent her life building things. Now she watched everything being destroyed. "We have to evacuate," she said to her crew. Her voice was calm, but her heart was breaking. "Get everyone to the refugee ships. Move." The station shook as alien weapons struck it. Lights flickered. Alarms screamed. People ran through the halls, crying, praying, calling the names of loved ones they would never see again. Yuna worked faster than she had ever worked in her life. Her fingers flew across the controls, powering up the 17 refugee ships that were docked at the station. Each ship could hold 10,000 people. It was not enough. It would never be enough. But it was all she had. Go! She shouted into the communication system. "Launch now. Do not wait." One by one, the ships broke away from the station and flew into the darkness. Yuna watched them go. She did not get on any of them. Someone had to stay behind to operate the launch systems. Someone had to buy them time. The last thing she saw was a beam of blue light coming toward her. Then there was nothing. On the horizon, Junho recorded everything. His ship was too far away to fight. It was too far away to help. All he could do was watch and remember. The aliens did not speak to humanity. They did not make demands. They did not explain why they had come. They simply killed. For 6 hours, they rained fire on Earth. They targeted the cities first, then the towns, then even the smallest villages. When they were done with the surface, they sent smaller ships into the atmosphere to hunt for survivors. 7 billion people had lived on Earth that morning. By sunset, almost all of them were dead. Junho's crew stood behind him in silence. Some of them were crying. Others stared at the screens with empty eyes. A young officer named Shin Ji-woo fell to her knees and vomited on the floor. No one blamed her. "Sir," said the communications officer, his voice cracking, "we are receiving a message. It is from the alien fleet." Junho turned. "Play it." The voice that filled the bridge was cold and strange. It spoke in perfect Korean, though no human had taught it. "People of Earth," it said, "your species has been judged by the Galactic Concord. You have been found dangerous. For the safety of all civilized worlds, you must be removed. Do not resist. Do not flee. Your extinction is necessary. Your extinction is complete." The message ended. Junho stood very still for a long moment. Then he spoke. "It is not complete," he said quietly. "We are still here." He looked at his crew. There were 32 of them. 32 humans out of 7 billion. "We are still here," he said again, louder this time. "And as long as one of us breathes, humanity is not extinct. The crew looked at him. In their eyes, he saw fear and grief and despair. But he also saw something else. A small flame. A tiny spark of defiance. "We run," Junho said. "We hide, we survive. And one day, we make them pay for what they did." He turned back to the controls and set a course for the outer darkness, where no aliens would think to look. Behind him, Earth continued to burn dot in the years that followed. The survivors would learn more about their killers. The Galactic Concord was a coalition of 12 alien species that had ruled the galaxy for 40,000 years. They had laws and courts and diplomats. They called themselves civilized. But when they discovered humanity, they had not tried to talk. They had not tried to understand. They had simply decided that humans were a threat and voted for their destruction. The vote was not even close. 11 species voted yes. Only one voted no, a small, peaceful race called the Vaulat, who were immediately overruled. The species that had pushed hardest for humanity's extinction was called the Velith. They were ancient and powerful, and they feared no one. But they feared what humanity might become. Their priests had an old prophecy that spoke of a world of fire and iron that would one day rise and end their rule. When they learned of Earth, they decided not to take chances. Better to kill billions of innocents than risk their own power. That was the Velith way. But the Velith made a mistake. In their arrogance, they did not check carefully enough. They did not hunt down every ship. They did not search every corner of the solar system. They assumed that a young species like humanity could not hide from them. They were wrong. 17 refugee ships had escaped from Sol Station. The Horizon and 3 other patrol ships had survived because they were too far away to be found. In total, fewer than 200,000 humans remained alive. It was not many. But it was enough. As Junho guided his ship into the darkness between the stars, he made a promise to himself. He would not forget the faces of his family, burned away in an instant. He would not forget the screams that had filled the communications channels before they went silent. He would not forget the blue light that had destroyed everything he loved. And he would not rest until the galaxy knew the same fear that humanity had known on the Anoth. Day the sky burned. The Concord thought they had ended a threat. They did not understand that they had created something far worse. They had created an enemy that had nothing left to lose. 15 years passed in the cold and the dark. The survivors found a place to hide. It was a rogue planet, a frozen ball of rock that wandered between the stars, far from any sun. It had no name, so they gave it one. New Dawn. It was a name full of hope, even though the world itself was nothing but ice and stone. They built their city underground, carving tunnels into the frozen rock with machines that never stopped working. They grew food in gardens lit by artificial lights. They recycled every drop of water, every breath of air. Life was hard. Life was cold. But life continued. Director Han Mai-Ray led them. She had been a diplomat before the fall, a woman who believed in talking instead of fighting. Now she led what remained of humanity with an iron will and a gentle heart. She was 50 years old, with gray in her hair and lines on her face. But her eyes were still young, still burning with purpose. "We have 2 goals," she told her people in those early years. "First, we survive. Then, we remember." She built schools so that children would know what Earth had been. She built hospitals so that the sick would not die. She built factories so that they could make what they needed to live. And she built something else, something secret. A fleet of warships. Kim Junho was her right hand. He was no longer the young lieutenant who had watched Earth burn. He was a commander now, hard and scarred from years of dangerous work. He led the scavenger fleet, small, fast ships that slipped through alien space and stole what humanity needed to survive. "We hit a convoy last night," he reported to Director Han one morning. Velith supply ships. We took their fuel, their food, their weapons. We left no survivors. Director Han nodded slowly. And our losses? 2 ships. 14 people. Junho's voice was flat. He had learned not to feel these losses too deeply. If he felt them, he would drown in grief. Their names will be remembered, Director Han said. Add them to the wall. The wall was a long corridor in the heart of a colony. Every human who died had their name carved into the stone there. It was already very long. Dr. Choi Do-won was the colony's greatest scientist. He was a strange man, thin and pale, with eyes that looked through people instead of at them. He spent his days in a laboratory filled with alien technology, taking things apart and putting them back together. Their faster-than-light drives are primitive, he told Junho one day. They bend space, but they do it the wrong way. Wasteful, slow. Junho frowned. Slow? They crossed the galaxy to destroy us. Yes, and it took them too long. Dahan smiled, and there was something dangerous in that smile. I can do better. Give me 2 years. It took him 18 months. When he was finished, he had built an engine that could cross the galaxy in half the time of any Concorde ship. Humanity's ships would be faster than anything the aliens had ever seen. Captain C.O. Nari commanded the defense fleet. She was a tall woman with short black hair and a scar that ran from her left ear to her chin. She had gotten that scar in a fight with Velith soldiers during a raid. She had killed 6 of them before their blades touched her. The Concorde still thinks we are dead, she told the council one day. Their patrols do not come near this part of space. They believe they finished us. Good, said Director Han. Let them believe. For how long? Nari asked. How long do we hide in the dark like rats? Until we are ready. And when will that be? Director Han looked at her for a long moment. When we can make them afraid. The day came sooner than anyone expected. Nari's ships captured a Concorde scout vessel near the edge of their territory. The crew was killed, but the databanks were preserved. Dr. Doan spent a week breaking through the alien encryption. What he found changed everything. It was not a prophecy, he said, his voice shaking with anger. There was no prophecy. The Velith made it up. They invented the story about a world of fire and iron so that the other species would vote for our destruction. The council sat in stunned silence. They saw our radio signals, Doan continued. They studied our history, our wars, our weapons. They decided that we would become a threat to their power. Not soon, but someday. So they convinced the Concorde to kill us before we could grow strong. Director Han closed her eyes. 7 billion people, she whispered. They murdered 7 billion people because they were afraid of what we might become. Yes, Doan's hands were shaking. They did not even give us a chance. They saw our potential and decided to end it before it began. Junho stood up. His face was like stone, but his eyes were burning. Then we showed them they were right to be afraid. Director Han opened her eyes and looked at him. What do you mean? They killed us because they feared what we could become. So we become exactly what they feared. We become the monster they dreamed of. We become their nightmare made real. The council voted that night. It was unanimous. Humanity would not hide forever. Humanity would rise. Humanity would make the Concorde pay for every life they had taken. Director Han stood before the colony the next day. Every man, woman, and child gathered in the Great Hall to hear her speak. 15 years ago, they burned our world, she said. They killed our families. They tried to erase us from existence. They thought extinction would be easy. They thought we would die quietly in the dark. She paused. The hall was silent. Every eye was on her. They were wrong, she said, and her voice rang like a bell. We did not die. We survived. We grew stronger. And now we are ready." She raised her hand and pointed upward toward the stars that hung above their frozen world. "They are out there, living in comfort, believing they are safe. They do not know that we are coming. They do not know that every day we grow stronger. They do not know that their time is ending." Her voice dropped to a whisper, but somehow everyone heard her clearly. "They tried to extinguish us. Instead, they forged us into something harder than steel. And now we will show them what humanity can do when it has nothing left to lose." The hall erupted in cheers. People wept. People embraced. People raised their fists toward the distant stars dot in the shipyard at the edge of the colony. A new vessel waited. It was called the Remembrance, and it was the most powerful warship humanity had ever built. It was twice as fast as anything in the Concorde fleet. Its weapons were a mix of human engineering and stolen alien technology. Its hull was painted black, so dark that it seemed to swallow light. On its side, someone had painted 2 words in white: "Remember Earth." The war was about to begin. The galaxy had forgotten about humanity. That was their first mistake. 20 years after the fall of Earth, the Velith Dominion celebrated its victory. The species called human was gone, erased from existence like a stain wiped from a table. The Concorde was safe. The prophecy would never come true. Life continued as it always had. Then the outposts started to die. The first was a military base on a moon called Sereth. 50 Velith soldiers lived there, watching a quiet corner of space. One night, their communications went silent. When a patrol ship arrived to investigate, they found the base in ruins. Every soldier was dead. The weapons had been taken. And on the wall, burned into the metal with some kind of cutting tool, were 2 words: "Remember Earth." The Velith commanders thought it was an isolated incident. Maybe pirates, maybe terrorists from one of the lesser species. They sent investigators. The investigators found nothing. Then a second outpost was destroyed. Then a third. Then a supply convoy vanished without a trace. Then a shipyard was bombed, and 200 ships were lost before they could even be completed. Panic began to spread. "It cannot be the humans," said the Velith High Council. "The humans are dead. We killed them ourselves." But the attacks continued. And every time, the same message was left behind. Remember Earth. Commander Kim Juno led the war from the shadows. His fleet was small, only 50 ships, but they struck with a speed and precision that the Concorde could not match. They would appear from nowhere, destroy their target, and vanish before reinforcements arrived. "They do not know how we move so fast," Juno told his officers. "They do not know where we hide. They do not know how many of us there are. Fear of the unknown is a weapon. We use it." General O Taiwu was the tactical mastermind behind the campaign. He was an old man, nearly 70, but his mind was sharper than a blade. He had studied every battle in human history. He had memorized every war. Now he used that knowledge to bring the Concorde to its knees. "We do not fight their fleet directly," he explained to the council. "We are too few. Instead, we bleed them. We destroy their supplies. We kill their soldiers. We make them afraid to sleep. 1,000 cuts, each one small, but together they will drain the life from our enemy." The strategy worked. Within 2 years, the Concorde was bleeding resources. Ships were pulled from exploration to patrol duty. Soldiers who had never known fear began to look over their shoulders. The alien species started to distrust each other. Some believed the attacks were coming from inside the Concorde itself. Lee Bora was the deadliest pilot in the human fleet. She was only 22 years old, born on New Dawn after Earth's fall. She had never seen grass or felt rain or breathed air that did not come from a machine. But she could fly a ship like it was part of her own body. They called her the Ghost. Target locked, she said quietly, guiding her fighter through the darkness above a Vilith weapons factory. Beginning attack run. Her squadron followed her down. 12 ships, moving in perfect formation. The Velith defense systems did not even see them coming. By the time alarms started to sound, half the factory was already in flames. Aura's ship twisted through the chaos, dodging fire, striking targets with impossible accuracy. In 3 minutes, the factory was destroyed. In 4 minutes, her squadron was gone, vanished into the void like ghosts. Casualties? Junho asked when she returned. None. Aura removed her helmet. Her face was calm, almost peaceful. We did not lose anyone. Junho nodded. Well done. The Velith were not the only ones paying attention. Ambassador Kale of the Valani species watched the reports with growing unease. The Valani had been the only species to vote against humanity's destruction 20 years ago. They had been overruled, ignored, threatened into silence. But they had not forgotten that Kale was old for his kind, nearly 300 years by human counting. He had lived long enough to see empires rise and fall, and he knew the signs of an empire falling. The Concord is fracturing, he told his colleagues. The Velith lied to us. They invented the prophecy to justify genocide. Now the truth is spreading, and the other species are angry. What can we do? Asked the younger Villani. We can survive, Kale said, and perhaps we can help the ones who should have survived all along. He began to search for a way to contact the humans. Meanwhile, the attacks grew bolder. Aura led a raid into Velith space itself, striking at their largest shipyard. The mission should have been impossible. The shipyard was surrounded by defense platforms and patrol ships. But Bora found a gap in their coverage, a tiny window of vulnerability that lasted only seconds. It was enough. Her squadron came out of nowhere, moving faster than the Velith could track. They launched their missiles, destroyed the shipyard, and were gone before a single shot was fired in return. 300 ships, meant to hunt down the last humans, were reduced to burning metal. When the Velith High Council learned of the attack, they were silent for a long time. They are not ghosts, the Supreme Commander finally said. They are not legends. They are real, and they are coming for us. For the first time in 40,000 years, the Velith felt something they had almost forgotten: fear. On New Dawn, Director Han Mai received a coded message. It came from a frequency that no human had ever used before. She stared at it for a long time before she understood what it meant. It is from the Valani, she said slowly. They want to talk. Juno stood beside her, reading the message. It could be a trap. Perhaps, but look at what they are offering. Han pointed to a section of the text. They have records. Proof that the Velith fabricated the prophecy. Proof that the attack on Earth was nothing but murder. We already know that. Yes, but the other species do not. If we can spread this information, the Concord will tear itself apart. Juho was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded. What do you want to do? Director Han looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, billions of aliens lived in peace, believing that the genocide of humanity had been justified. She was going to show them the truth. We accept their offer, she said. The Velith built their power on lies. It is time for those lies to fall. The war was entering a new phase. The shadows would soon give way to something brighter and far more dangerous. The lie that had held the Concord together for 20 years came apart in a single night. Ambassador Kale kept his promise. He delivered the records to Director Han Myri, thousands of files, proving that the Velith had invented the prophecy, that they had manipulated the other species into voting for genocide, that Earth had never been a threat to anyone. Director Han did not keep this information secret. She sent it to every corner of the galaxy, to governments and news networks and underground resistance groups, to anyone who would listen. The reaction was immediate and violent. 3 species withdrew from the Concord within a week. The Valani made their betrayal official, publicly condemning the destruction of Earth. The Korath, a warrior race that prided itself on honor, declared that they had been dishonored by association. The Selene, quiet creatures of crystal and light, simply disappeared from Concord space and refused to return. The remaining species demanded answers. The Velith gave none. "They are lying," Supreme Commander Theron declared. "The humans have created false records to divide us. Do not believe their tricks." But the records were not false, and everyone knew it. The Velith had been too arrogant to hide their crimes properly. The evidence was overwhelming. Yoon Hana was the diplomat that Director Han sent to speak with the defecting species. She was young, only 30 years old, with a calm voice and gentle eyes that hit a core of iron. She had lost her entire family on Earth. She had every reason to hate. But she understood that hate alone would not win this war. "We do not ask you to fight for us," she told the gathered ambassadors. "We do not ask you to risk your people for our revenge. We ask only that you stand aside. Let us face the Velith alone. Let us claim the justice that was denied to us." The Valani ambassador stepped forward. It was Kale, the one who had first reached out. "And if you win, what then? Will you destroy the Velith as they destroyed you?" Hannah was quiet for a moment. "I do not know," she said honestly. "That decision is not mine to make. But I can tell you this. We did not survive 20 years in the darkness to become the monsters they claimed we were. We want justice, not extinction." Kale nodded slowly. "Then you have our support. We will not fight alongside you, but we will not fight against you either. The Velith stand alone." It was exactly what humanity needed. Commander Junho led the human fleet into open war. 200 ships now flew under the banner of New Dawn, each one built with technology that the Concord could not match. They were faster, stronger, and driven by a fury that had been building for more than 2 decades. The first real battle happened at a place called the Sereth Corridor, a critical passage between Velith territory and the rest of the galaxy. The Velith had stationed 300 ships there to guard it. They expected the humans to be afraid. They were wrong. Junho's fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. Before the Velith could react, the first wave of missiles was already flying. Human ships danced through space like nothing the aliens had ever seen, dodging fire, striking weak points, working together with terrifying coordination. The battle lasted 2 hours. When it ended, 112 Velith ships were destroyed. The humans lost 17. They were supposed to be primitive, a captured Velith officer said, shaking with fear. They were supposed to be weak. "What are they?" Junho looked at him with cold eyes. "We are what you made us." News of the victory spread across the galaxy. Species that had watched the war from a distance began to reconsider their position. Some offered secret support to humanity. Others began to negotiate surrenders before the human fleet even reached their borders. Supreme Commander Theron saw his empire crumbling around him. He had ruled for 60 years. He had crushed rebellions and conquered worlds. But he had never faced an enemy like this. "We must destroy their colony," he told his council. "New Dawn. If we find it and burn it, the humans will break." "We do not know where it is," one of his generals said. "Then we search until we do." It took them 3 months, but they found it. A spy among the defecting species had sold the information. Theron gathered what remained of his fleet, 400 ships, and set course for the course. Frozen planet where humanity had hidden for so long. Captain Isio Nari was waiting for him. She had known the attack would come. Erector Han had prepared for it years ago. New Dawn was not just a hiding place anymore. It was a fortress. Contact in 30 minutes, her officer reported. 400 ships. They are coming fast. Nari smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. Let them come. Her defense fleet was small, only 60 ships. But they had something the Velith did not: home ground. Every asteroid, every debris field, every shadow in this region of space was known to Nari's pilots. They had practiced fighting here for years. The battle began with fire and chaos. Velith ships poured into the system, weapons blazing. Nari's fleet scattered like leaves in the wind, drawing the enemy deeper and deeper into the killing ground. Now, she said quietly, hidden weapons platforms activated. Ships emerged from behind asteroids. Mines that had floated silently for years exploded against enemy hulls. The Velith formation shattered as captains tried to escape the trap they had walked into. For 6 hours, the battle raged. Nari lost ship after ship, but she held the line. Her pilots fought with desperate courage, knowing that their families were depending on them. Every Velith vessel that fell was one less threat to New Dawn. Then, at the darkest moment, when Nari's fleet was down to 18 ships and the Velith were closing in for the kill, salvation arrived. Commander Junho's fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel directly behind the Velith armada. 200 ships, fresh and ready, with weapons already charging. "This is Commander Junho to the Velith fleet." His voice rang across all frequencies. "You came to destroy our home. Instead, you will die here. If any of you wish to surrender, now is your only chance." None of them surrendered. They were Velith. They would rather die than submit to humans. Junho gave them their wish. The battle ended an hour later. Of the 400 Velith ships, only 12 escaped. Supreme Commander Theron was among the survivors, fleeing back to his homeworld with the ruins of his fleet behind him. Director Han watched the victory from the command center on New Dawn. Tears ran down her cheeks, but she did not wipe them away. Around her, people were cheering, embracing, weeping with joy. "We won," someone said. "We actually won." Han shook her head slowly. "Not yet. Theron is still alive. The Velith homeworld is still standing. This war is not over until we finish it." She looked at the stars, at the distant point of light that was the Velith sun. "But soon," she whispered. Soon, a message arrived from Ambassador Kale. It contained coordinates. Theron had retreated to his homeworld, to the heart of Velith civilization. He was gathering what forces he had left for a final stand. Junho read the message and smiled. It was not a kind smile. "Prepare the fleet," he said. "We are going to end this." The human fleet arrived at the Velith homeworld on the 24th anniversary of Earth's destruction. Commander Junho stood on the bridge of the Remembrance and looked at the planet below. It was beautiful. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds drifting across the sky. 12 billion Velith lived there. 12 billion souls who had celebrated when Earth burned. Around him, 200 ships waited in silence. Every weapon was charged. Every pilot was ready. They had traveled across the galaxy for this moment. They had suffered and bled and died for this moment. And now it was here. "We have visual on the enemy fleet," his officer reported. 60 ships. They are holding position around the planet. 60 ships against 200. The Velith knew they could not win, but they would fight anyway. They would die defending their home, just as humanity had tried to die defending. Earth. The difference was that humanity had never been given a choice. "Director." Han Murray's voice came through the communication system. She had traveled with the fleet, though she was old now, her hair white and her body frail. "Supreme Commander Theron is requesting to speak with us." Junho's jaw tightened. "Put him through." The screen flickered, and Theron appeared. He was old for a Velith. His scales faded and his eyes tired. But there was no fear in his face, only cold pride. "So you have come," Theron said. "The ghosts from the void, the monsters we failed to kill." "We are not monsters," Juno replied. "We are what remains of a world you destroyed." Theron laughed. It was a harsh, ugly sound. "You are always monsters. We saw it in your history. Your wars, your weapons, your endless hunger for more. We did what was necessary to protect the galaxy from you. You murdered 7 billion innocent people. And I would do it again." Theron leaned forward. "Look at you now. Look at what you have become. You have burned your way across the stars. You have destroyed fleets and shattered worlds. You proved that we were right to fear you." Jun-Ho said nothing. The words hit him like stones. Behind him, Lee Bora spoke quietly. "He is wrong. We only fought because they attacked us first. Did we?" Dr. Choi Do-hoon's voice came through the Cha. "Nell. He was aboard another ship, but he had been listening. I have built weapons that can destroy suns. I designed engines that let us move faster than anyone imagined. I did it because they hurt us, but I did it all the same. Perhaps the Velith saw something in us that we did not want to see in ourselves." The bridge fell silent. Chunho looked at the planet below. 12 billion lives. 12 billion beings who had never held a weapon, never voted for war, never known that their leaders had committed genocide in their name. Children who had just been born. Elders who remembered nothing but peace. Ordinary people who wanted nothing more than to live their lives. "Commander," Director Han said softly, "the decision is yours. The fleet will follow whatever order you give." Jin-Ho closed his eyes. For 24 years, he had carried hate in his heart. He had dreamed of this moment every night. He had imagined watching the Velith world burn, just as Earth had burned. He had told himself it would bring him peace, but now, standing here, he felt nothing but emptiness. "I watched our world die," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I was 23 years old. I saw the cities fall. I heard the screams. I carried the names of everyone I lost. My mother, my father, my sister, my friends, everyone." He opened his eyes and looked at Theron's face on the screen. "I want you to suffer," Juno said. "I want your people to know the fear we knew. I want to take everything from you, the way you took everything from us." Theron smiled. "Then do it. Prove that you are exactly what I said you were." Jun-Ho stared at him for a long moment. Then he shook his head. "No," he said. "I will not." Theron's smile faded. "What? We did not survive to become you. We survived to become something better." Jun-Ho straightened. "We are not monsters. We are human. And humans do not commit genocide, even against those who tried to genocide them." The fleet channel erupted. Some voices shouted in protest. Others cheered. Bora was silent, her face unreadable. Director Han spoke over the noise. "What are your terms, Commander?" Jun-Ho looked at Theron. "The Concord is dissolved. Every species governs itself. No more councils that can vote for the extinction of others. The Velith will surrender their military fleet and disarm completely. You will pay reparations to every species you have wronged. And you, Theron, will stand trial for your crimes." "I will never submit to human justice," Theron spat. "Then you will spend the rest of your life in prison, watching us thrive. Watching the galaxy move forward without you. Watching everything you built crumble to dust." Jun-Ho's voice was cold. "That is your punishment. Not death, life. A long life, filled with the knowledge that you failed." Theron's face twisted with rage, but he had no response. His fleet was defeated. His empire was gone. He had nothing left. The surrender was signed 3 days later. Theron was taken into custody. The Velith military was disbanded. And across the galaxy, species that had lived in fear for thousands of years began to breathe freely for the first time. 30 years later, on a world that had been terraformed to look like old Earth, children played in parks filled with trees and flowers. They laughed and ran and knew nothing of the war their grandparents had fought. The sky was blue. The air was clean. The sun was warm. Director Han Mai-Ray sat on a bench, watching them. She was 90 years old now, small and fragile, but her eyes were still bright. Beside her sat Jung-Ho, his hair gray, his face lined with age. "Do you ever regret it?" She asked him. Junho was quiet for a moment. "Regret what?" "Letting them live. Showing mercy when they showed us none." He watched a little girl chase a butterfly across the grass. Her laughter rang like bells. "Every day," he admitted. "Every day, I think about what I could have done, what I wanted to do. And then I look at this." He gestured at the park, the children, the peaceful world around them. "And I know I made the right choice." Han nodded slowly. "We built something new, something they said we could not build. A future." In the center of the park stood a monument. It was a simple stone, weathered by 30 years of rain and wind. On it were carved 2 words that every human child learned before they could read: "Remember Earth." But below those words, someone had added a new line. It had been put there by the first generation born after the war, the children who had grown up knowing peace. The line read, "And remember what we chose to be." Junho smiled. It was a real smile, the first one he had allowed himself in longer than he could remember. "They tried to erase us," he said softly. "They thought fear and fire could destroy humanity. They were wrong." Han reached over and took his hand. Her grip was weak but warm. "We are still here," she said. "We will always be here." Above them, the sky stretched on forever, filled with stars that humanity had once thought unreachable. Now those stars were home to billions of humans, living and working and dreaming. The species that the galaxy had tried to destroy had become one of its greatest builders. The Velith had feared what humanity might become. In the end, they had been right to fear. But not because humans were monsters, because humans were survivors. Because humans were stubborn and hopeful and refused to let hate define them. Because when given the choice between vengeance and justice, they had chosen to be better than their enemy. That was the lesson the galaxy learned. That was why the Velith failed. They had tried to erase Earth. Instead, they had made humanity eternal.